completely different than things that we've been doing since the 80s with MUDs. And it's been a gradual evolution. Little things have been added. And World of Warcraft was just a game that did things like EverQuest and Final Fantasy and everything like that, but just did it a little bit better. But I think a lot of things changed. One was we had always-on broadband. Okay, this is going to be interesting, using my mobile phone for the clicker with the microphone. And computers got faster, graphics boards got better, and people started playing the game more. And one of the big changes that occurred was, I don't know how many, well, first of all, how many of you have played any kind of MMORPG, including MUDs? Okay, everybody. So how many of you have, okay, how many of you are level 60? How many of you have more than 2 level 60s? Okay, so I think we got the Warcraft community here. It doesn't sound like I have to explain too much, but I think one of the key things is that World of Warcraft is now about 8 million people. So EverQuest, Final Fantasy, they're still in the hundreds of thousands. And millions of people is a very different thing, because when you used to play EverQuest and MUDs, it was kind of like the hacker community. You would go to a dinner, but you wouldn't talk to your friends about it at high school, and you wouldn't talk to your parents about it. You met people online that you played with, and they were your friends. And it was cyberspace and real life. And sometimes you had crossovers, but generally you didn't run into people walking down the street who also played. The difference is, with 9 million people, although half of them are Chinese, when you go to a dinner in Silicon Valley or in Berlin, I think, you'll often find somebody else who plays World of Warcraft. And families play, and if you look at the statistics, a huge number of people play who are real-life friends, which is a much larger percentage than it used to be. So I think that World of Warcraft is something we've been working on for a long time, but is a big jump. And it's growing very, very fast, and I think it's going to grow faster. It has lots and lots of problems, because it's coming out of a game industry which has been not very internet savvy, relatively closed. So intellectual property stuff is not that great. There's all kinds of problems with World of Warcraft. But despite the problems, it's become a very interesting community and interesting phenomenon that I want to talk about. Let's see if this clicker works. So first of all, one of the things that people often ask is, well, Warcraft is so much better than Second Life. Well, they're not this, you shouldn't compare them. It's like apples and oranges, because if you remember, people who are my age will remember back when MUDs came, and then they split off with Moos and Mushes. And Moos and Mushes were these games where it was more about creating things and creating objects, and the kinds of people who participated were very different than the kinds of people who participated in MUDs. MUDs were more about constraints and limitations and death. When you died in a MUD, in the original MUD when I played, I was one level from becoming immortal, and I was killed. And the original MUD, when you're dead, you're dead. There's no cemetery, there's no walking, you're dead, and you have to start again. And it's a completely different thing. It's like the difference between being a race car driver and being in some kind of experimental mechanical lab. And so while they are both 3D worlds and they are both sort of classified in the same genre, I don't think we should say that, compare them really, and that we should think of them as an and rather than an or. And I use both of them quite a bit. This is my Colosseum on my island, and we have very good video streaming in Second Life, so I can stream my Warcraft videos, and we can sit around and talk about them and watch them on maintenance day when the servers are down. And then we can even sit around and talk about strategy. One of my friends is building a Ironforge replica inside of Second Life, so we can sort of hang around there when the servers are down. But to get to Warcraft, so I think this is, again, old news for a lot of people, but Richard Bartle was a guy who was one of the guys who worked on the first MUD, and he had this thing called the Bartle types. He classified people into 4 basic categories. And in Warcraft, the main thing I think that leads to the success of Warcraft is that they got those 4 types of gameplay down very well. So if you split them up, one is achievement. This is like gaining levels, gaining gear, it's getting better, looking cooler, and it's this kind of self-achievement growth part of the game. So this is your character and has all your stats, and they keep getting better. The other important part is exploration. So this is like the lore, this is talking to the historian, this is the quests, and some people really get into that and know the whole lore of the game. Some people don't care, but some people, that's the main thing. And especially on role-playing servers, the lore is very, very important, and people are obsessed with that. Another important part is the socialization. This is, I just marked it there, it's kind of a silly thing, but that's the chat window. And some people just sit in Ironforge, face a wall, and do chat all day, right? And your guild is also your social thing. And so for some people, World of Warcraft is just a fancy IRC client. And then there's the other part, which is the killing, right? So these are my spell book. You can sit around and kill other players. You can sit around and kill monsters, do damage. But the whole notion of competition, struggle, fighting with each other, strategy, that's a completely different part of the game. And if you look and ask people, you can generally ask them sort of which are their favorite things in which order. And that kind of defines the way they play the game. And if you look at successful guilds, they tend to focus on a certain balance of these four kinds of gameplay. Some of them balance all of them, and some of them balance some of them specifically. But this is also important to understand, because when you think about the World of Warcraft, I know people that all they do is do fishing. And some people, all they do is do the auction house. You know, you can play the game in a completely different, unique way, and you can write your add-ons and just focus on writing add-ons to figure out the economy and things like that. And all these different gameplays are legitimate and interesting, but it's the interaction between these four that actually make it even more interesting. So I think they got a lot of this stuff right. So this is, since everyone sort of already plays, I'm going to go through this very quickly, but you start World of Warcraft rather lonely, by yourself, with a little toolbar, and you're looking around trying to figure out what to do. You quickly realize when you get into a little bit higher levels that you can work together with other people to take down bigger bad guys. And then when you get to level 40, you get a mount, so you can ride on the mount and move around a lot faster. And this is a very important part of your experience. And then ding, you're level 60, yay, you won Warcraft. Not. Because actually, this is me in August 2005, and this is my gear. And then this is me in January 2006, slightly better gear. And this is me in March 2006. This is the Arcanist set. This is what you get from the little 5-man, 10-man dungeons. And then, when you do the special ones, you got the 0.5 set. This is a Sorcerer set, slightly better, took a couple months. And then this is the Arcanist set that you get from the 40-man dungeon, Molten Core, which requires a raiding guild and lots of grinding and lots of work. And today, I'm kind of a mishmash of Tier 2 and Tier 1 and weird things, just to try to do as much damage as I can. But I'm not even halfway through my gear yet. And the thing is that I've played, this is confidential from the company, but I've played, so if you look at this calculation, you know, it's taken me about 30 days to get to level 60 games played. But I've been sitting here at level 60 for 72 days. And I'm only halfway through the gear. So the way that Blizzard did it, and I don't know how much they pre-thought it, is you get to level 60 and then the game, a new game starts there, which is more about putting together the gear and things like that. And it's been, people have been stuck there for a long time, and it's kind of getting a little bit old, and the new content is starting to run out, and there's a limit to how much you can do with just gear. So yay, we can start leveling again in January when Burning Crusade comes out. But this is going to be a very weird experiment, and I think that other games have died when they've tried to do this. So we'll see how it's going to work, because what happens is you've got people who have been stuck at level 60 working on their gear for years. You've got people who just arrived at level 60, and then you have to see how that gameplay is going to work out, and it's still unclear how successful that will be. They're also doing some new things with player versus player. But anyway, they're moving ahead, but this is continuing in the same kind of mold. So let me describe, and since most of you already play, you'll know what this is, but this is a player versus player environment. This is Alterac Valley, and this is the Alliance versus the Horde, the two factions, and I'm sitting here trying to kill the Horde to capture this tower. But this is an example of most of the elements in this the bad guys here are other players on the other side. And this is a UI that I'll explain a little bit later. This is the entrance to Molten Core. And Molten Core is the first 40-man dungeon that you get to. So you have to be level 60, you have to do some quests to be allowed to get in here. But basically this is 40 people, 8 classes, 5 of each class, and you've got healers that heal, you've got tanks that hold these monsters' attention, and then you've got healers that heal the tanks, and then you've got the mages and other people who do lots of damage and take them down. And then you've got a variety of other classes that do other roles. But the key to this is getting this group together, and also when this group isn't perfectly balanced, figuring out the right strategy to do this. But running a 40-man raid, imagine trying to organize 40 people every weekend to go to a movie and have 8 different roles about what each of those people are going to do, and make them do that over and over again that day for 8 hours. It's quite an important task, a difficult task. But in order to get that Arcanist set that I had, you have to do this every weekend for about 6 months. But this is also a very interesting thing, because this is kind of like the ball. This is, you work to level 60, grinding by yourself at the beginning, then with 5 people, then with 10 people, and hearing about Morton Core in the guild chat all the time. And then finally you get here and you realize this is the first time you've ever seen 40 of your fellow guildmates in one place at one time. And there's an enormous amount of coordination that's required. So you have a raid leader, you have class leaders. I have about 8 different channels going in my chat with different colors for all the different things that I have to coordinate. But there's a very good paper by John Seeley Brown. He's used to run Xerox PARC, and he's also very excited about World of Warcraft. And there are a lot of basic things you can talk about here. A lot of people now, researchers are saying, you learn things like project management. This is a great metaphor for certain kinds of real-time project management. You get a group together, figure out what each person can do, figure out the resources you can put together and move forward. There are a lot of direct and indirect things you can learn from this. You can learn how people work under stress. You can learn how people are good at communicating. One interesting thing I'll say, my raid leader is a night shift nurse in Virginia. Our main tank, our former main tank, used to be a foreman in Australia. One of our rogues is a bartender with ADD. One of the things I've realized, though, is I haven't found a single MBA who is good at leadership in this situation. Most of the people who are good at leading here are people who are good at listening. It's actually very similar to leadership in open source. People are talking about and discussing the whole dynamics of this thing, the fact that it's real time and all that. That's very interesting, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But John Seeley Brown brings up a very interesting point, which is there's another level of learning that you get. It's a kind of imagination, and it's a kind of emotional thing. And he uses a word called ensemble. And I don't know what the German word for this is, but it's when you have a band or an orchestra together and suddenly you're in the zone and you've just got it right. And when you don't have it right, the 40-man raid can disappear in like 10 minutes. Everybody just logs off. But when you're in the zone, it just feels right and everything works together kind of like magic. And there's no sound. Can I get the sound? So this is... So this is 40 people taking down Onyxia, which requires a lot of coordination. And it really does feel like some kind of magic when you've worked, and suddenly 40 people all work together in concert without having to know the whole of it. They do their part and somehow it works out. And this kind of thing is also, I think, very interesting because we have kids in our guild who are, 14 years old and are, act like 14-year-olds. But when they get into this raid and they realize if they do something stupid, they get kicked out or people get mad at them. But if they do something right, suddenly they have 39 adults telling them how great they are. And this kind of sense of being part of a group and achievement as a group is also really important, something that you can learn. And I think it's also very interesting to note, getting back to my guild makeup, I have a priest in my guild, one priest, actually 2 priests. I have lots of soldiers. I have a policeman. I have students. I have business people. I have just about every kind of cross-section of societies you can imagine. And it's actually